In Ultimas 4, 5, and 6, there was no bad guy. Rather, they focused on the player's personal pursuit of enlightenment. Eventually, though, I sought a way to combine the two models, integrating both virtue and more complex villains who were thoroughly incorporated into the story. So when we began designing Ultima VII, I needed to create an enemy that was worth the difficult pursuit. I needed to create the best possible bad guy. This was also the first time I looked beyond the end of the specific game I was working on. I thought it would be interesting to create a dark force, an ultimate opponent that would appear in the next 3 games and would tie them together as a trilogy. This ultimate force of evil would be called the Guardian. Players would meet and defeat his most visible minions in Ultima VII, but the ultimate showdown with him would not take place for 2 more games. In fact, in Ultima VIII, the Guardian would gain the upper hand and challenge the player to survive in a world ripe with absolute evil. I spent a great deal of time creating the Guardian. It couldn't just be some kind of monster with incredible powers. It had to be an evil entity that might truly exist. I found the answer in a newspaper insert. At the time, the Church of Scientology was being investigated by various government agencies. To combat that bad publicity, Scientology circulated a 16-page full-color insert tucked inside USA Today. The insert included a photograph of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard on the front page, with a caption that described him as a Renaissance man, and each subsequent page covered his achievements. At 13, America's youngest Eagle Scout, aviation pioneer, explorer, mariner, and World War II captain. Each of these was illustrated with some type of inspiring photograph. Hubbard the master mariner at the helm of a ship, Hubbard the philosopher sitting at his desk with a quill pen, Hubbard the humanitarian feeding children. There were 16 pages of this, and one of the last pages boasted, which I thought was completely ironic, L. Ron Hubbard, one of the greatest writers of pulp fiction. Correct, I thought. Lots and lots of fiction. The final page was a call to Dianetics. The insert was a valiant attempt by a PR agency. While I didn't take any of it seriously, I knew that a lot of people did. It dawned on me that this was the type of enemy I needed to create. If you were going to create a charismatic leader, I realized, these were the qualities you would want him to have. I thought about the charismatic leaders in history. With the exception of recent madmen, none of us knows what they were actually like. No one knows what the real Buddha enjoyed eating, for example, or if Moses had a sense of humor. Over the course of time, their cult status prevented us from seeing them as actual human beings. But watching it happen to a contemporary figure like L. Ron Hubbard was fascinating. This was the pattern for creating a god, and out of it was born Batlin, the chief villain of Ultima VII. Batlin was never intended to be the ultimate evil, but rather the puppet of the greatest evil in this world, the Guardian. The Guardian is a malevolent force that transcends the worldly plane. What made both Batlin and the Guardian especially evil was their being fully aware of the harm they were causing. Purposely harming other people was the way they got ahead. Batlin is not Hubbard, nor was he intended to be Hubbard in any way. I was more interested in how Hubbard was promoted as a great leader than in the specific details of his character. In fact, I felt I had to invent a whole new philosophical code for this game, something that this leader could embrace and expound upon, that went further than truth, love, and courage. It had to be simple, yet meaningful enough to attract a following who would believe it was the truth. And it had to be a set of values that I could later twist into something really, really dark. Eventually, I settled on unity, trust, and worthiness. Batlin was the leader of an organization called the Fellowship that traveled through the land recruiting the good people of Britannia to join them around these 3 ideals. The way the leaders of the Fellowship would explain them publicly was that we, as a society, needed to band together because we could accomplish so much more as a tribe than as individuals. To join together on that path, we had to trust each other, and each of us should strive to be worthy of membership in this tribe. Through these ideals, we would individually perform better, find the freedom to operate independently, and ultimately the tribe would advance. It seems like a positive and reasonable message, just like a lot of the tenets of Scientology. But then I began twisting it into something considerably darker. Unity, for example, eventually came to mean you were either with us or against us. Anyone who wasn't part of the fellowship became the enemy. Trust mutated into a belief in everything Batlin said. No one could question his authority. And adherents had to keep proving their worthiness to the tribe at the expense of all else. And that is how the positive-sounding fellowship could transform into something sinister. In the Book of Fellowship, Batlin also very subtly discredits the original 8 virtues. While they are certainly a worthwhile goal, he writes, they are too hard for most people to follow. Instead, the fellowship offers a simpler path to reach enlightenment. In fact, he was creating a new truth. It was all designed for the player to believe, at least initially, that Batlin was trying to spread positive values. I hoped players would want to enlist in the fellowship, thinking that these were the new virtues of the game. It was not until they got further into the game, after they had ceded control and given public support to this movement, that they saw the brutality and the darker interpretations of these same virtues. The true purpose of the fellowship was to create the gateway that allowed an evil entity called the Guardian to get inside Britannia and eventually gain control. All of that background helped make Batlin a believable monster, allowing the player to fight for the existence of Britannia.